What is up, fellow Doom Patrollers? Welcome to my Season 3, Episode 3 breakdown, recap, and review. And today was another awesome episode. It is the last of the 3-episode drop, I suppose you could say. And also, you could kind of look at it as this backdoor pilot for the Dead Boys Detective Agency from the comics, because that is a series that is supposedly in the works in the background. And this is kind of like, you can liken it to that of Titan Season 1, Episode 4, Doom Patrol. And we got the original Doom Patrol characters in that, if you guys remember, but when it actually got greenlit into a production, there were some changes, like Niles Calder turned into Timothy Dalton and things like that. So who knows where things will go from here on out. It could get a very much so greenlit thing if it hasn't done so already. And personally, I like the characters. I think I need to be sold on them a little bit more, but that's, well, what a pilot is for, I suppose. Also, this was just a backdoor pilot, but from what I've seen so far, it was like an awesome introduction, and especially combined with the story that the Doom Patrol had to deal with after dying, in a very quick recap from Samuelson, who just couldn't quite let it go like Gargoax did, and he kind of did fulfill the Brotherhood of Evil's contract on Rita, but he also did that and more through killing all of the Doom Patrol members. So picking up right after the events of Episode 2's ending, we have the Doom Patrol in the underworld, I guess you could say, and this is quite trippy because we've had 2 episodes in 2 DC TV shows. Not trying to get into deep spoilers here, but in Titans Season 3, they went to the underworld in the latest episode, and now we have the Doom Patrol's DC Comics version of that as well. And already, like, right at the beginning with this intro scene, I just want to talk about the thing that intrigued me most, and maybe I'm missing something here, but yet again, it pertains to what I've spoken about in my past couple of reviews, and how Rita, there is something seriously big going on with her. More than, I mean, obviously they've conveyed that to us, but here, as they're getting rode along in the underworld, so to speak, where they're about to be processed with their souls on a kind of soul hanger line, if you will, everyone passes out but Rita. Why is that? Like, I genuinely don't know. Everyone, passed out, and Rita was the only one conscious for the whole episode. Everyone had to go through their little kind of afterlife closure kind of thing, which was a really, really cool thing to do and get into the heart of our characters even more. But Rita didn't exactly go through that. Not only that, we can't forget about this, I just call him the wrinkled face man. Who is he? And why did he call Rita Mandy? Or Mindy? I think it was Mindy. And I tried looking up, what is Mindy short for? Is there like a variety of names? And I'm trying to, lock on to the Rita theories here. I know people, as I've already discussed, have theories that Rita could be like Madame Rouge because they have similar powers, and maybe they're going to kind of blend 2 characters into that. As I've kind of already briefly spoke about, I don't necessarily think they're doing that, but there's something going on here, and I think Rita doesn't know who this person is because she hasn't quite met him yet in a timey-wimey way. And why am I talking about that? Well, we know a version of Rita pushed her back in at the end of last episode, so you kind of see where I'm going with this. Maybe that version of Rita has already met the wrinkled face man who called her Mindy in the underworld. But I don't know. I felt very sorry for Larry because he's arrived back at Doom Manor when everyone's already missing, so to speak, and he's without the negative spirit, so he's kind of going through all of this alone, which is when some parcels arrived, which I imagine Samuelson kind of mailed to Doom Manor, and it is the bodies of all the Doom Patrol members. Now, Larry is freaking out, and he gets to the point of where he even tries to keep them around through wrapping them up in bandages in Doom Manor as well, which I thought was hilarious. It was both hilarious, but both sad, because you see how desperate he is to try and process this in his own little unique way. But this is when we are taken back to the weird kind of lizard soul production line thing, and if you have watched Titans, I guess you could liken these lizards to that of the ghouls that we saw in that episode, or the train guards, if you will, who are processing the souls on the train, and this is Doom Patrol's, it's like a soul processing thing, so similar concepts here. But with what we see next is kind of each journey that the Doom Patrol members go on as their soul could arguably be passed to their stop-off point, or like where they could go next. And this gives you an opportunity to interact with other souls who are close to you. So for Cliff initially, we got to see him come across his dad. And his dad's kind of idea of an afterlife is hilarious, because it's hilarious, but it's also not at the same time. There's poor freaking Pegasus Pegasus horses. It takes me back to the Hercules cartoon that I just loved so much growing up. I haven't watched that movie in years, but yeah, Pegasus are getting butchered. Can we get a hashtag justice for Pegasus horses down in the comments? We know Cliff and his relationship with his dad anyway. They've never really been on the same footing, and I like the takeout of this because he realizes that his father had a relationship with Clara that he never knew about, and I think that really rubs him up the wrong way in a multitude of ways, because he never really got to have that relationship with his father. So how is it kind of fair that his father had more of a relationship with his own daughter than he had with his own son, so to speak, if you're still with me there? So let alone there's that, but also Cliff has missed out on his own daughter's life and is only just getting involved with it. So for Cliff to learn that his dad already has been there, done that with family time with his own daughter before him, I think that is just another thing that is really winding him up. Which is why when he was breaking free towards the end, when everyone was waking up, he was like, I'm not gonna let my dad out grandpappy me or something. He wants to be, I think what it is for him, he wants to be better than his father was to him. And it's also kind of hard to accept that his father even took a turn in the first place. So the next kind of opportunity for a moment with one of their loved ones, if you will, I guess, you know, Cliff's dad isn't so much a loved one, but for Cyborg, this most certainly is, and it's kind of matched with my favorite also being Jane this episode, because I really love what they revealed with Jane in terms of the personality being based on a certain someone. But with Cyborg, I feel like it's a story where you can't really miss if you're getting him to interact with his mother, because usually, obviously, in every iteration, it's this short kind of cut-off moment where his origin into becoming Cyborg is usually very much so linked with some accident that happens with his mother. And, you know, in this case, it was a nasty argument, if I remember correctly. And now the fact that he gets to kind of talk to her in like some afterlife little thing, it was a beautiful opportunity for him to kind of get some closure. And this is what I mean about Doom Patrol with what I've said in my reviews. I feel like as much as we keep getting almost these full circle moments with these characters, they're also giving us so much more. Like here again, we're getting another closed full circle moment with Cyborg. He gets to process the accident, and his mum's just like, don't you dare kind of blame yourself for a single thing here. She's actually living her best life out here, hiking and everything. So he now gets to know, assuming the memories are intact, which I believe they are in the real world, that his mum's having a great time hiking wherever she freaking wants to. By the way, just performances wise, absolutely fantastic. A lot of people love Cyborg on this show, and you can really see why in scenes like this. And this, what I was getting to is he gets the opportunity he had to talk with his mother about Ronnie. With the whole debate around how he really likes her, she's someone who's in a lot of pain, but what he did obviously isn't exactly legally ethical, if you know what I mean, but the way, morally speaking, he just saw that he gave this person another chance, and that was the only thing that felt right. I am waiting for that Ronnie confrontation moment where maybe Cyborg, despite doing the right thing through letting her go in one way, the next time he runs across her, he might be forced to genuinely confront her and be like, okay, look, I can't keep giving you second chances, which could lead into what Silas said a couple of episodes back with, we spend our whole lives trying to change people sometimes, but it took me my whole life to realize that those efforts were futile or something. So that could come into how, as much as he wants to try and change Ronnie and try and make her better, she can only do that herself. Later on, they do begin to lean into, what do you mean that Dad chose to make me into a weapon? He said he had no choice at all, that this was the only way to save me. And that's an interesting factor because, you know, it's always been presented that Cyborg had to be Cyborg, or should I say Vic had to be Cyborg to survive. But the way that his mum phrased that in that moment made Vic question it. It's like, well, was there another way that could be brought back? Which obviously would be another, thing to dive into with his father. But then, on the other hand, with Jane, we had her and Kay in their afterlife visit Kay's grandmother, which is technically Jane's grandmother because they're technically the same person in a way. I found all of these scenes very, very sweet because you see how much of a good time that Kay has living with her grandmother. Jane even points out that she doesn't think she's ever seen Kay smile this much. But then again, on the other side, she feels very guilty with how she feels like she could have done more with helping out with the situation that went on at home with Kay. I do like how she also gets closure in her own kind of afterlife with how much Jane reassures that Kay is no longer hurt by her father anymore. Like that is in the past. And Jane herself says that she's failed that little girl so many times and she honestly doesn't know why she keeps her around, which is kind of what I wanted to get into. We learn the very reason why Kay really has Jane as the primary and why Jane is such a good primary and connects so well with Kay Chalice over any other of the personalities, because we see all of these dolls in this cupboard and the grandmother says that all she knows is making these dolls made the hurt less. Who can say why? Which is when she details that she made this Jane, who would be the strongest of them all, flawed but strong, and that is because Jane is Kay's grandmother's actual name. So I thought it was very sweet looking at everything back in hindsight that you realize that Jane is modeled after Kay's grandmother. I don't know, I just feel like everything clicks into place so nicely there. Just learning that backstory of that Kay in her own mind would have kind of made Jane in a way and kind of visualize the concept of her after her own grandmother. And not only to that, we got some awesome scenes between Jane and the grandmother talking about what if she fails Kay. That's like such a big, pressure of obviously hers as the primary. And that's when the older Jane, if you will, since that is her name, says to Jane that you might, and it might crush you like it crushed me, but you'll do what I did. You'll take this pain, you'll make something of it, and you'll survive, which is literally what Jane does time and time and time again with these, trials that we've seen her go through in the underground since season 1. So she truly is the grandmother, just a new iteration of her, if you know what I mean. And I don't know, that's just a great way to do Jane's afterlife. So as I said, mixed with the Cyborg one, Cliff's one was good as well, but this one was, I don't know, this one hit me. But back with Larry, we have Dorothy return, and she's kind of seeing how dodgy Larry is acting. He's very much so trying to cope with the fact that all of his friends are dead, which is when Dorothy's like, we need help, and this is when it gets into the backdoor pilot, if you will, of the Dead Boys Detective Agency. We got to see the Doom Patrol's iteration of London for a very brief second, and we get our introduction as well to that of the Dead Boys, Edwin. We have Charles, and we have Crystal as well, and I wonder if Dorothy has somewhat of a future with them, if something happens in the future with that show, just because Dorothy, as we know later, kind of seemingly left with them. We have Danny, the ambulance, arrive because Dorothy used them to contact the Dead Boys because they would literally know that they would be helpful in that situation. So Danny gets the Dead Boys Detective Agency to arrive at Doom Manor. They do a good job of explaining some of the subtleties of the characters, like usually you wouldn't be able to see Charles or Edwin compared to Crystal because she's actually the alive one, but you can usually see ghosts if you've been close to death or extreme horrors or something. But yeah, they explain they are here to solve any and all supernatural mysteries, hauntings, cursings, and otherworldly cases, and that really does personify the Dead Boys Detective Agency, and it's kind of like almost like a supernatural Sam and Dean Winchester kind of thing, but at the same time different, but you kind of get the idea. So after contacting Rita and getting some belongings, because we can't forget that Crystal is the medium who could kind of make that link, whereas the other two, Edwin and Charles, have a lot more knowledge of how the world between world and ghost things more or less work, because they're the guys who have actually been dead for quite a long time. And, as we learn throughout the episode, they've been escaping death. They are basically experts, which is why you can imagine this series to be a really rich filled series of content where we actually dive into that otherworldly realm of things. It would almost be similar to that of almost this kind of John Constantine show, if that character probably wasn't already embargoed for one of the other projects that is most likely being worked upon in the background somewhere right now, because there has been rumors of the Constantine character being prepared to be used for something. So after successfully getting in contact with Rita, they realize that they must be in the Tunnel of Souls. Initially, Charles, Edwin, and Crystal were hesitant about helping the Doom Patrol Patrol because obviously they are trying to do their work in this agency without being detected by Death, because, well, if there's one thing we know about Death, well, she more or less serves one purpose, and these two guys are evading that, so you could kind of view it like they do not want to run into anytime soon, and through going into the freaking underworld, that is, you don't exactly want to go into a place of a bunch of people who work for Death. But luckily we have good old Dorothy to somewhat convince them to help out. They come up with this plan for Larry to astral project because he can somewhat act as this torch to find the other Doom Patrol members in the underworld since he's linked to them, and they travel through the mirror. We learn a bit more of the subtleties of the underworld and even the characters themselves, with Edwin explaining that Charles never officially crossed over when he died, and Larry isn't actually dead, so he is the only one that this place actually knows, and to get access to the next place, they literally need to use pain to open the door. In that moment when he touches it, I believe we get a flashback to somewhat of a bit of his origin, similar to that of where we saw Charles, I believe, in the lake, and he was getting thrown stuff at him. I actually haven't read any issues or volumes of the Dead Boys Detective Agency, so this is all brand new to me, like even as a concept and the live action backdoor pilot. So for all intents and purposes, I'm really enjoying this, and like the characters I find are very interesting, and even with these little brief teasers of the ambiguous origins that they have, because these are also very old characters, even though they are young at the same time, so I'm quite intrigued to learn more about them. I mean, obviously, if this show actually turns out to be a thing, I'm sure they will introduce the origins of all the characters in the first, second episode, but I would be interested to read some of that as well, and let me know if you want to hear more about the Dead Boys Detective Agency in the comments and how you received them in this episode overall. I also like how they decided to make Larry try and speak to Edwin about Charles, because he can clearly tell that they both like each other, and if there's anyone who can relate to this somewhat feeling of taboo surrounding sexuality back from the time where Larry came from, he could totally understand what Edwin would be struggling with, considering, as I said, Larry came from a time where that was really just not accepted, let alone Edwin coming from a much earlier time than even Larry. I thought it was really sweet, and it also broke my heart a little bit when Dorothy kind of low-key put that bar of chocolate there, trying to reach out to Niles still. Around about this time as well, we got a really good introduction into who Crystal is as a character between that conversation that happened with Dorothy and Crystal, and how we got to learn about how she was possessed. Charles and Edwin managed to, I believe, vanquish that demon, but not without the demon taking something from Crystal, such as all of the memories of her parents, anything that would just kind of help her know about them or how to find them. So she reveals her mission, that is to find David the Demon, and you can tell, like, obviously, if we get the season of the show, we will probably be seeing that actually come to fruition. So if you're already interested in this, you can be sure to bet that they would be getting into this in the first series of the Dead Boy Detectives Agency. But anyway, around about this point, everything's coming to a head in the episode. We have Larry calling out for Rita, they hug and they meet, which is when another freaking supernatural character comes in, none other than Ruth Connell's Rowena from, well, it's not Rowena in this, she's actually the night nurse. Personally, as a supernatural fan, just seeing Kipling, obviously having been Crowley, Rowena come in here, it's just fantastic to see. Now, the night nurse works for Death herself, which is why Edwin and Charles already know who she is, and they allude to the fact that the night nurse has kind of been after Edwin and Charles for a long time. I love how when Charles hits her, she just has this horrible, like, insect-looking freaking face, which is when the wrinkled man comes, and this is one of the most intriguing parts of the episode for me, just because mysteries really bug me, and he kisses Rita's hand, calling her Mindy, and he says, "You don't remember me, it's okay," and then just as he kind of departs, he seems to say this saying that already seems to be like a thing they would say to each other, even though Rita clearly hasn't met this man at this timey-wimey point in her life. But he says, "Never let them see you sweat." And he, kisses her, winks at her, and then runs off to try and charge the night nurse, but he gets absolutely yeeted away. But yeah, this is what's making me think, are they going to do a thing where Rita, in terms of where that other version of her obviously is using the little drill time capsule thing, does she get stuck in the past and meet this guy? I'm not going to speculate too much about this now, because I feel like I've really exhausted where I can go with it, just because I don't know, but I really do encourage you to let me know your own theories down in the comments, because this guy clearly knows who Rita is. And my only theory as to why he's got like the wrinkled face look is that perhaps if you spend a long time in the underworld, you kind of forget a part of yourself and who you are, maybe, and it's kind of literally brought out through disfigurement. Like you if you don't remember who you are or what you look like, so to speak, you might have that brought out. I think that's been done in something else before. Either way, though, everybody runs back onto the boat. We have frickin', I'm just gonna call her Rowena, just convulse and then just throw up, and you would have thought it would be acid or something, but no, it was just truly a flex, and I love that because everyone's like, yay, it's just vomit. Rita did get asked who was that guy who knew you in the underworld or whatever, and that's when she said, I don't know, and they say maybe he had the wrong Rita, which is when they literally show a flashback to when we saw the other Rita, which kind of just further solidifies that version of Rita, whatever point in time she is at, knows this character, like that version of her. But that's clearly something that our Rita hasn't quite done yet, which is so interesting. As I mentioned earlier, the end of the episode kind of wraps up with the Dead Boys Detective Agency going, but Dorothy seems to be leaving with them. She says that she has some things to find. I'm not sure if that's meant to kind of hint at she wants to go along with them to maybe reach and further contact Niles, potentially. It's left kind of ambiguous, but I do believe that this will be it for some time before we see Dorothy again. I do really hope that we see Abby Montrese Dorothy again this season. I just have no idea, other than what we've seen so far. She could come back like she kind of just turned up to Dune Manor this morning after leaving with Danny the ambulance in the first or second episode, if you guys remember, so maybe that means if she just came back this episode, she could just walk up to Doom Manor again in episode 7, 8, or 9. But I do have a little feeling in me that maybe this is the episode where they, you know, nicely kind of write her out for some time. But this part of the episode, the very, very ending, and it kind of makes me understand why they wanted to drop 3 episodes at once. Same with Titans, with what happens in episode 3. It kind of really does, I know I've said this a few times, but this really does kick off the next chapter of the season, and that is with the introduction of Madame Rouge, literally just making herself at home, just humming away. Jane, being Jane, is like, who in the sweet mercy of fuck are you? And she's literally like, good question. And that is because she doesn't remember who she is. And take it from me, as a person who's seen episode 4 and 5, even if you're a fan of Michelle Gomez already, it is just fantastic. It keeps getting better and better and better. I would say episode 5 is the next big whammying episode. This is my favorite word to use in the reviews at the minute. Propels you into the next chapter of season 3. But yeah, I can't wait for you guys. I mean, we've only really been teased with Madame Rouge at the end of episode 1, and then now, obviously, after the underworld journey is over, all I'm gonna say is you ain't seen nothing yet, and I can't wait myself to see even more. So guys, what did you think of episode 3 of Doom Patrol season 3? Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to know your theories as well as for how everything connects to everything else. Who is the wrinkled man? Do you agree with the wrinkled man? Do you agree with any of the theories that I started to begin the threads of? But I would love for you guys to expand that thread by a good old meter or 2. Other than that, would really appreciate a like on this video, maybe subscribe if you've been here a few times before, or even if you're brand new. I'm sure you'll like some of my other videos. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, and there are other links to my Discord server. You'll find those in the comment section, which is the top pinned comment of mine. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you members of the Doom Patrol in the next video. Goodbye.